I like maths. I like CNC. Can I mathematically determine which unit is the best in CNC Tiberian Dawn? Well, yes. Yes, I can. Because I already did it. In this video, I'll show you how I painstakingly came up with a formula to determine which unit is mathematically the best in Command & Conquer Tiberian Dawn. Then, I'll go over the results and break them down with a mathematical analysis. Stick around until the end of this video, as even if you're not a Tiberian Dawn player, I assure you, this video will still be very interesting to watch. Surprisingly, there's a very clear answer to this question. First, we must understand that this is not a very practical question. If you're looking for the best unit in the campaign, then without a doubt, the best unit is the Mammoth tank. If you're looking for the best unit on the ladder, then there is a discussion to be made, but the 4 best units are probably buggies, attack bikes, medium tanks and grenadiers. However, to see what the best unit is mathematically, we must look at the unit as a sole entity. Therefore, factors like building requirements to make the unit, which faction the unit is a part of and how well it pairs with other units in its faction can't be taken into the equation. My point is that this question does not really answer anything particularly useful in the game. However, it still is an interesting thing to look at, as maths don't lie. Anyway, long introduction, blah blah blah, let's begin. A unit is a texture with some bundle of stats and abilities assigned to it. These are the 4 most important characteristics of a unit. HP. This basically tells the game how much damage a unit can take before it dies. It's fair enough to say that this is one of the simplest values that a unit can have in the game. Next up, attack values. This tells the game how much damage a unit does to another unit. And even though this might seem simple enough, in the source code this is a little bit more complicated, because for example, have you noticed that flamethrowers do a lot of damage to infantry, but not a lot of damage to heavier types of vehicles? Of course you have, and this is because these units have different armor classes. The actual damage that a unit does to another unit is calculated like this. You take the unit's weapon's original damage value and multiply it by the, bear with me, weapons bullets warhead multiplier according to the armor class of the unit being fired upon. Now, these multipliers might seem random at first, but you can think of them as percentages, where 256 represents 100% effectiveness against a specific target. Tiberian Dawn source code is very old, and it usually stores numbers in 1 byte. 1 byte is 8 bits, which means that there are 256 unique numbers you can define with 1 byte. In the system, 0 is the minimum value and 255 is the maximum. The source code finds out the true damage value by dividing this multiplier by 256. This means that, technically speaking, you can never have a unit in the game that's 100% effective against the target, which is kind of funny, because 255 is the largest value defined. To make our lives a bit easier, you see what I did? We are also going to divide this multiplier by 256. Oh, and we're not done, as then we have to round this value to its nearest integer. Now, to get the average attack value of a unit, we can just sum up the gain attack values for all 4 armor classes. We can do this because all 4 armor classes are equally as important. And then, to make this simpler to understand, we can just divide the sum by 4. No, stop. I'm telling you this because if you do this for the technician's values, it turns out they shouldn't deal any damage to heavy vehicles because of the rounding, and it's exactly what we see in the game. So you know this legendary Hexatix video that is almost older than me?
It's a lie, all of it.
The technicians never had the chance, they just cannot deal any damage to the flame tank. Anyways, back to the 4 most important characteristics of a unit, the next set of values are speed values. These values include the speed, rate of fire, and rotational speed of a unit, as well as the range of its weapon. Now, because the unit speed value is super inconsistent and buggy in the game, to gather the actual speed of a unit, we must run simulations in the game. 8 times for each of the infantry units and 2 times for the rest of the units. We're going to use these speed values as a way of saying how many shots a unit can do in a certain time frame, as all these values contribute to the shot count. The simulation works like this. You take a unit, if it can be rotated by 180 degrees, then make it shoot at a target that is 15 cells away, then count the times the unit shot at the target in a 15-second time interval on the fast game mode. This seems fair enough for all the speed values, because every value had a fair balance roll in the final unit shot count value. Anyway, if you can't tell, this takes forever to count, as what you have to do for each of the simulations is record it, put the video in a video editor, find the exact frame a unit started moving, cut the video from that point, and then just skip to the next 15 seconds and count the times the unit shot at the target. To gather all the data, I did this 78 times. 78 times. It took me a month to do all this because firstly, this is really boring. Secondly, I don't have that much free time. While my friends were relaxing, I grinded this. While my CNC buddies were on ladder, I was counting this. Very cool. That's enough of whining and that's enough of speed values. The last important characteristic is the cost value. This tells the game how much credits you have to spend to make the unit. Pretty simple to understand. Now, onto the formula making process. Finally. So first, we must gather all these values for each of the units, and bada bing bada boom, we have all the values in an Excel spreadsheet. Fun fact, I tried making this video in 2023 with a different approach than the approach you're about to see, and I gathered all the necessary data and did all the calculations in a Python script I wrote. But then I had the eureka moment. I could do this in Excel. Basically, I'm the wisest man alive. Anyway, now we have all the data that we need. Hold on, lads. How can you actually use this data? It's not like we can just add all these values together, as they aren't mutually relevant to each other. Good question, viewer. I know that you totally asked this question. What we can do to make these values mutually relevant is called, in statistics, normalization, where we scale values relative to the average. I'll demonstrate the idea of this for the HP and attack values. First, we calculate the average HP for all units. Then, for the unit we're interested in, we take its HP and divide it by this average value that we got. This shows us how many times higher or lower that unit's HP value is compared to the overall average HP value. If we do the same process for the attack values, then we can use these two values we got in a meaningful and relevant way. This will be the basis of our formula. So if we did something like this in our formula, we could get some kind of a final value for each unit, where the unit with the highest value would be considered the best overall. But it isn't really logical just to add these four normalized values together, because as I hinted previously, we're going to use the final speed value of a unit as a way of saying how many shots that unit can shoot based on our in-game simulations. Therefore, we must use this shot count as a multiplier to the average attack value for the unit, and then based on that data normalize it. So in a way, we have combined the speed values with the attack values. Also, the cost value doesn't describe how the unit acts. If I have two identical units, but one costs 100 credits to make and the other 200, after training them, they both will obviously act the same. So we must use the cost value as a way of saying how many units can we train per, let's say, 1500 credits. 1500 credits because that is how much the most expensive unit costs that has a firing ability, the Mamma Tank. So the cost value will be the final multiplier for the sum of the normalized HP value and combined attack values. This is where infantry will shine, as they are usually cheap to produce. And that's pretty much it with our formula. Pause. So you can keep doing that. Lads, you said that a unit is a texture with some bundle of stats and abilities assigned to it. Where are the abilities included in your formula? Well, that is a very good question. What we must do to make this formula complete is to somehow include abilities of special units. If we looked at a stealth tank, for example, in just terms of its stats, we would be overlooking its entire purpose, to be cool and stealthy. So to include the abilities is a must. If we would not do that, then this video would be lame. Before we include any unit special abilities into the formula, we must understand that we can't measure the stats for all the units. Units that can't be built and units that can't attack in a direct way must be taken out of the equation. So units like engineers, MCVs, gunboats, and a lot more will just be ignored. But how can we include abilities in the first place? Well, A single ability is going to be represented by a multiplier in its respective value. If the ability is a good thing to the unit, then the multiplier will be obviously larger than 1. If not, then it will be lower. Now, how can we measure an ability? Well, it depends on the ability. With some abilities, we can extract the multiplier with some logic behind it. Some we must come up with ourselves that feels fair for the rest of the units. In total, I included these very important abilities. Is a unit crushable? Can a unit crush? Can a unit fly? Can a unit hit a flying unit? Is the unit stealthy? Can a unit self-heal? And then there are 2 special cases that are not considered as abilities but as a characteristic of the unit's attack value. One for the commander and its C4 ability, and one for the mammoth tank with its 2 weapons. It was a great effort to put all these abilities into the equation, but if I didn't do that, then it wouldn't be fair for all of the units. I won't explain exactly how I did it in this video, as it would take too much time and it's boring. However, I already have uploaded all the explaining for the spreadsheet and the formula in an unlisted video that is available in the description down below. The video is a lot more casual and I just deep dive into the little things of this formula that makes it dope. Like for example, how can you measure a commando C4 ability in terms of damage? Also, if you would like to use the data from this spreadsheet, then follow this unlisted video down below, as there will be a link in the description where you can download it. Anyway, with the abilities included, with all the stats measured, this is our final formula. With that, we can get the final value for each unit. Oh, and for clarity, we will also calculate the average final value. Then divide each unit's final value by that average and round the result. We will call this value not as final value compared to average final value rounded, but appropriately just as final score. Because I did that in the result, the average score for all units would be 1. That means, for example, if you see that a unit has a final score of 2, then that would mean it is 2 times better than the hypothetical average unit. Just so you can try to guess which unit is mathematically the best, here are all the units that are included. Minigunners, grenadiers, rocket soldiers, flamethrowers, chemical warriors, commandos, Humvees, APCs, medium tanks, MLRSs, mammoth tanks, buggies, recon bikes, artillery, light tanks, flame tanks, stealth tanks, SSMs, Orcas, and Apaches. Now finally, with that, we can move on to the results. Mathematically, the best unit in Command & Conquer Tiberian Dawn is the Commando with a score of 2.48. Honestly, one of the coolest units ever, but the result makes sense. One Commando can bring absolute chaos if it's in an enemy base. Further analyzing the results, we see that the attacking value of the Commando was the reason why it did so great. While its main weapon provided a lot of damage to no armor entities, the C4 ability absolutely saved the Commando from a mediocre final score, as it had a significant role in the Commando's attack values for the rest of the 3 armor classes. Further showing the results, we can see that the Commando won by a landslide, with the second place taking the buggy with a final score of 1.32. What is interesting is that the buggy has no special abilities, so its results are just pure facts and math. This makes sense. The buggy, as I said previously, is one of the best units on the ladder, and it doesn't have to have any special requirements to make it, you just need an airstream. With one buggy you get a decent amount of damage, great speed, a decent amount of HP, and it only costs 300 credits. It's just a very solid unit overall. The best infantry unit is the Grenadier, taking the 3rd place, which is also very convenient because, as I said previously, the Grenadiers are really good units on the ladder. Whilst the worst is the Rocket Soldier, who placed bottom last in the result list, with it being around 4.3 times worse than the hypothetical average unit. This is because the Rocket Soldier does not deal a lot of damage and had terrible results in the shot count simulations. Also, aircraft did badly. However, we can say that mathematically Apaches are better than Orcas in Command & Conquer. Also, from the results we can conclude that the most average unit is the artillery. Now, using this table, we can also determine which faction has better units. We can just sum up all the results of the units that are in their respective faction and divide it by the unit count. And by doing that, we see that... Hi, hello. Sorry for interrupting myself. I'm in the middle of writing the script for this part, but I haven't actually checked the result. And the GDI unit average score is 1.047, and the NOD unit average score is about to be seen. Everyone in CNC Tiberian Dawn agrees that the NOD faction is significantly better than the GDI faction. Everyone on ladder is pretty much a NOD player, almost everyone. So if this result is lower than this result, then that means that GDI units are better than NOD units, on average. I have a slight feeling that the result that I'm about to see is going to be lower than this result because the NOD unit arsenal includes these subpar units. Enough waffling, let's just see the results. I have a feeling I'm gonna be disappointed. Well, I was wrong. Let's move on. We can also determine which unit has the best HP value per 1 credit, and these are the results. We see that the medium tanks and mammoth tanks and light tanks are the bulkiest units, while the commandos are the weakest in terms of its normalized HP value. We can also determine which unit has the best normalized attack value per 1 credit, and these are the results for that. As we can see, commandos provide the most amount of normalized attack per 1 credit. Also, grenadiers and flamethrowers did very well in this sphere. We can deep dive these normalized attack values even more by looking at which units provide the most amount of normalized damage in each armor class. Here are all of the results for that. I'm not going to analyze each result as they are very similar to each other. But you might be wondering, why do commandos do so much damage to, for example, the steel armor class, which is the heaviest of unit armor classes? Their main weapon is practically useless against steel armor units like medium tanks. Well, that is because the steel armor class and other armor classes include buildings in them. Therefore, we must split the attack value according to this table, where in this case, 70% of the damage would go to the commando's main weapon, but the 30% to that of the C4 ability. And that C4 ability is so powerful that it totally elevates that weak 70% of the attack value from the main weapon. Basically, the commandos in this case are so powerful because buildings are scattered in wood, aluminium and steel armor classes, meaning that the C4 ability plays a massive role in these class attack values for the commando. This is why the commando had such a great result, but to be fair, it is the only unit that can instantly blow up buildings. The last thing I will analyze is how powerful a unit is mathematically without the cost multiplier. So that means it's 1 minigunner versus 1 grenadier versus 1 medium tank, etc. Basically, this table could be used as a way to compare the units in a 1 versus 1 scenario. And to make these results more interesting, we're going to remove buildings from this table. Therefore, the commandos can't use the C4 ability. And here are the results for that. Unsurprisingly, the mammoth tank absolutely dominates in this scenario, while flame tanks and medium tanks also did very well. What is surprising for me is that the MLRS is so high up in the result table. And in the bottom we have infantry, which are generally much weaker than vehicles in a standalone matchup. Yet still, the rocket soldier is bottom last in the list. Even the 3 times cheaper minigunners totally surpassed it. This video was a nightmare to make. A very large first video to this new Ruvenge channel. I hope you found this interesting. The next video will be about Command & Conquer Tiberian Sun. But I'm also planning to make some videos about the first CNC Red Alert, and of course more videos about Tiberian Dawn. If you want to get notified when I upload something, you know what to do. I also promise that the next video will be very interesting. But yeah, that is up to you. What I care about the most is whether or not you like the video, as that will help me to determine if I'm on the right path with this new channel. Okay, whatever, thanks for sticking around, bye bye.